Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 718. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, the good, the bad, the oh my gosh of OKRs. A conversation with Luis Gonçalves. Earlier this year, I attended Agile 2022. It was a fantastic conference. One of the undercurrent themes was the use of OKRs, objectives and key results, to enable agility, align organizations, and cure COVID. There's no such thing as a silver bullet, especially with the wide range of interpretations of what an OKR is and how to apply them in organizations. Luis returns to the podcast to set us straight. Luis Gonçalves is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and international keynote speaker. When consulting, he works exclusively with entrepreneurs, founders, and senior leaders on the implementation of his game-changing ADAPT methodology. By following the ADAPT methodology, executive leaders will be able to transform traditional project-based companies into modern digital product companies. He also includes a link to an OKR guide in the show notes, so please reference that. Luis Gonçalves, welcome back to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure. I think it's the third time now? Fourth?
I think it's probably fourth or fifth, actually. I didn't total them up, but it's a big number. Of course, I think when this runs, it'll be probably the end of September. We'll be about 2/3 of the way through year 16 of the podcast. So
wow.
You've been one of the stalwart contributors, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. It's always interesting, always really good conversations that we have together.
Absolutely. Luis, today, the fashion du jour, at least in terms, and I say that, I might actually mean that a little bit mean, but the whole idea of, let's start. OKRs. OKRs seem to be what everybody's doing, and everybody's doing them wrong, and at least I think they're doing them wrong, and they look a whole lot like what we were doing in the 1980s and 70s and 90s, and called those, MBOs and goals and things like that. I thought these things were supposed to be different. What's an OKR?
Well, now you went straight to the point. So first of all, it's very confusing because people now talk about OKRs like being the new kid on the block. And I usually introduce OKRs by mentioning that OKRs were created on the 70s. By Intel, MD Groove, right? And now it's very popular because of John, that he brought it to Google, and then everyone wants to copy Google. everyone wants to be Google, but no one wants to do what Google does, right? So it's easy to copy tools, but it's not easy to copy mindset and understand the work that's around it. But what are OKRs? For me, my own definition, it's a very simple tool to translate strategy into daily operations in a way that everyone at any given time knows how their small work is contributing to the big picture. That's my own definition of OKR. So it's a tool framework to translate strategy into daily operations. What is so different than all the other tools that we were using? I have two main things that I believe they make the whole difference. Mindset and the cadence of the duration. Mindset because it gives a lot of power to people, or freedom for them to contribute to the work that the company needs to perform in order to fulfill the vision. And it's much faster because it's in a much shorter cycle. Let's say it's usually 3 months versus management by objectives, which usually was 12 months. But in my opinion, it's a lot about the mindset because it's more to provide the people what needs to be done, or even better, we provide what needs to be done, the how is done by the normal people, the normal worker. The problem is a lot of the consulting world is not passing this message along, so OKRs is becoming a managed by objective tool with a 3-month cycle. That's my view on it.
Well, at least it's faster, right? At least it's faster. Except in a lot of organizations, we're still doing OKR, even when we're doing, and I'm doing the air quotey kind of things, the OKRs, we're still doing them on the old cadence because that's what HR expects. So there's been no synchronization to HR. But let's step back. The whole idea of a mindset change, and I think you said it pretty brilliantly. Everybody wants to be Google, but nobody wants to adopt their mindset. If we're going to try and use things like OKRs and not adopt the mindset required for them, what ends up happening? What's the outcome?
It's just another tool. It's just another tool that doesn't bring any benefit to the organization, and it will not change anything, in my opinion, right? So it was very interesting. 2 weeks ago, one of my prospects contacted me and said, "Hey, Luis, I wanted to implement the OKR stuff." And I said, "How eager are you to change your entire organization?" And it was really, what? Yes. How eager are you to change your entire organization? And when I talk organization, it's not just mindset, but really the organizational design that you have, right? And I will explain soon that point. And how eager are you to change the mindset of your company? And what are the percentage of people that you believe that will leave the organization? And that was the shocking question. What do you mean leave the organization? And say, my friend, you are running a company for the last 20 to 30 years in a very command and control way. Now you want to implement OKRs, and let's assume that you won't implement in the proper way, which is giving a lot of the decision power to the frontline worker. Do you think that the people that are comfortable with management by objectives or very directive ways of working will be happy with a much more empowering way of working? So of course some will love it, some will hate. So how ready are you to change mindset, organization, and people leaving the company? And the guy was, wow. So I think that's 3 of the big things that OKRs do. And if you are not ready for it, then it's just another tool. It will not change anything, in my opinion.
When you talk about organizational design, how do OKRs or doing OKRs with the proper mindset, how would that affect organizational design?
That's a brilliant question that I love to get from people. Because I actually usually say, OKRs will help you to design your structure. And why is that? Because, and this is another thing that you were asking people who are doing in the wrong way. So for me, one of the biggest mistakes that organizations do is they implement OKRs, but design OKRs for departments. They create organizational goals, objectives for each department. And that really doesn't change anything. So you continue to work because one of the things that people say is OKRs align everyone and creates transparency and put everyone working together. But if you go and you create OKRs for your own department, now you are very aligned within your own silo, but not on the big picture. So what I usually do is I help companies to implement OKRs, but defining the OKRs from the customer point of view. So that means that it's not about departments, it's about the product. So create OKRs for the product and solving problems for the customer. And that alone by itself will create a huge amount of dependencies your entire organization, because you will not care if you are from marketing, if you are from QA, if you are from development, if you are product, doesn't matter. You are creating OKRs to solve a problem to your customer. So if you actually start to design your organization based on the OKRs and the needs that the OKRs are screaming at you, it will change completely your organizational design, and you will move from a typical functional organization, typical project organization, to a much more product-centric organization. And that's how OKRs actually help you to tremendously change from a project to product organization, from my point of view. And that's why they literally change the way how your organization is structured.
That almost sounds like it's not a requirement, but a pretty strong recommendation that you have organized around value chain before you adopt, or as you adopt OKRs.
It doesn't need to be a very disruptive approach. So usually what I do is I only have a rule, which is let's do it from product point of view. Mm-hmm. Don't touch on your organization, but let's see what the organization look like or could look like if we would have clusters around products. Let's keep the same structure, keep the same organization, but let's see what the OKRs will scream at you. And when they started to see the amount of dependencies, they by themselves want to go in this direction. So my experience is the leaders will immediately start to understand dependencies. They will start to understand different ways of working, and by themselves, they will start to create value streams. But yes, that's a very strong recommendation from my side. If you want to take the benefit out of OKRs, really start to create OKRs from the product point of view, from the customer point of view, because it's what's matter, right? So it doesn't matter if you are very good in marketing, if your development is crap, if your product itself is crap, doesn't really matter because you don't make money with it. So it's a very strong recommendation. Align your OKRs toward the product and allow the OKRs to design your own structure.
I've lived in companies that had excellent product points of view. They could actually manufacture. It was both clothing and a few others. But they could manufacture this stuff all day, and it was really fine product. They just couldn't sell it. Marketing and sales fell apart. So again, those silos, the fact that they were silos, I think got in the way. That mindset, we've been talking about that kind of a mindset, product mindset, probably for 15 years now. If I go back in the archives and listen to some of the podcasts you and I have done, I think we've talked about that back in some of the earliest times that we chatted. Why in 2022, and might as well, I mean, if you're listening a year from now in 2023, you're probably wrestling with the same problem. Why are we still wrestling with not getting aligned around product and staying in these more functional silos?
I think there are two main issues from my point of view. One of the biggest main issues is the educational system. That's my opinion. It's because if you go to an MBA, they will still teach you industrial era principles, right? So they will teach you how to set up a company, to build a company in a very industrial age oriented way. If you are a startup founder, one of the first things when you start to scale up, you have a bunch of venture capitals telling you, now you need to hire a VP of this, VP of that, VP of that. And right there, they are immediately putting yourself in a project way, even if they think they are a startup, a very modern product startup, but in reality, they are designing an organization using industrial age principle, right? Why? Because I still believe they came from typical MBA educational school that still teach them how to design an organization like we were designing 100 years ago, even if now we are talking about digital products. 100 years ago, we were manufacturing cars. So the principle is very different. 100 years ago, you wanted to optimize for cost. Now you want to optimize for speed. So it's very different approach. But educational system, I think, is one of the things. And from my point of view and my experience, what I'm feeling is in Portugal, Germany, Saudi Arabia, is a new generation of leaders is now approaching and take over. And that's, for me, a sign that, or hope, that we are changing. So a couple of weeks ago, I was approached by a couple of leaders here in Portugal saying, Luis, we really wanted to start to build a peer group community of executives to teach executives how to change from project to product. And these guys are my age, 30-something, 40 years old. So the new generation is aware that the new ways of doing things are not really working anymore, so they want to change. But still, most of the leaders that are running big enterprises are still people that absorb old education, right? So they have their ways of doing things. And come on, we need to be a little bit humble, right? So we are consultants, but if you are talking with a guy that multi-billion-dollar company, who the hell is Luis Gonçalves to arrive there? Hey, the way how you design your entire company, it's a little bit BS, right? So you really should start changing the way how you do things around here, right? And so we need to be a little bit humble, and you cannot just go and the guy is where he is because he did some really fantastic things in the past. The problem is what he did in the past most probably will not work to lead him to a brighter future. But most of these guys are already in their 50s, 60s, so they will not change now. So I believe it will still take a decade, maybe less, but I still believe it will change, but it still takes some time.
You don't think that the educational system, the MBA systems, the universities are still teaching the old school way of doing it, or do you think they've started teaching the next layer? Because let's face it, and having spent a lot of time in the universities, 6 different universities, it is, even though it is mind opening, it to some extent does cause you to think in a very structured manner. So it is a little bit constraining. So you don't think that the educational system will continue to constrain leaders into the future until it changes?
Definitely it will. So I have a brother, which is a PhD guy, is a professor, and what they are teaching today, it's what they were teaching 20 years ago. So in many schools, yes, but I still have a lot of hope. So right now I was invited into one of the business schools here in Portugal to build a completely product, or let's say program, for students for post-graduation business guys, to actually how to build a company for digital product development. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing or trying to do my part here and trying to bring a new wave of ideas into the universities. And this university, it's very well known in Portugal. So I believe the 2 others that are competing with it, they will launch their own courses as well, their programs. So it's like Elon Musk says, right? I don't care if others come with electric car. My big purpose is actually bring a cleaner world. And in this case, it's the same. I don't care if other universities bring courses or programs to compete with mine or ours. What I care is that the students will acquire new skill set that allows them to build better companies in the future. So I'm trying to do my part here, but there is a lot to be done. Sure. Because even if the universities, and that's my experience, want to teach new things, the way how they run universities, the way how they think, it's very old-fashioned as well. So it will take a lot of time until we are able to change the educational system.
If you were tomorrow morning, you were given the power to help an organization implement OKRs, what would be the first couple of pieces of advice that you would give them to get them started?
I would start by making sure the board of directors bought the idea. Because if the board of directors, the entire management C-suite doesn't buy the idea, it will fail. Don't even start with it. Because you can start with small pilots on the teams, but at the end of the day, if the C-suite did not buy in, they will dump their own objectives and their own goals into the teams, and they can do their OKRs, but it will never work. Okay? So the first piece of advice is making sure that the C-suite layer bought the idea. The second piece of advice is making sure that you are aware the organization needs to change. And the third piece of advice is, are you sure or are you even aware of the percentage of people that might leave your company because OKRs will force in an indirect way, but it will force a different way of working. And a lot of people that are used to be told what to do will not be comfortable at all with this. So that's the three things.
That's fair.
Buy-in, organizational design, and workforce.
Two more important questions. Well, there are other important questions, but two more that relate to OKRs. How have you seen HR organizations, at least here in the States, HR organizations tend to control how people are paid, how people are evaluated, the whole management by objective system, even when it's called OKRs, is embedded in the HR system and the HR group, not in the rest of the organization. How does HR have to change to actually leverage OKRs?
So for me, there are two possibilities from my experience. They are our best ally, or they are our worst enemy.
Enemies, yeah.
So if we got chief HR that really understood that what matters is the product, what matters is the company, then we have a huge enabler there. If we have a chief HR that says, or imagine in her head, his head, we are losing the power, then we have a huge problem. Because they immediately feel they are touching on my turf, they are changing on my territory, and I'm losing my power. So I will make sure this fails because the HR are the ones that need to control all that stuff.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I understand why HR feels that way. I mean, HR, many people think HR is there to enable people and all that good stuff. HR is there to protect the company and enforce policies and keep them from getting sued and make sure that the company assets don't run off, those sorts of things versus anything else. So sometimes they view loss of control or that loss of control as putting the organization at higher risk. And obviously that's fallacious, but at least when it comes to OKRs. One of the things I've recently heard when discussing OKRs with organizations is that, hey, Tom, if we let everyone create their own OKR, there's no central vision. Therefore, everybody will be doing something different. It will be sort of Brownian movement, random movement versus anything that's really focused on solving a business problem or having a business impact. Where should the vision that people are striving for come from?
I saw that problem in a couple of companies, and I think this is a huge misunderstanding because a lot of people believe OKRs, it's very empowering and everyone comes up with their own ideas of what they need to do, but this is a completely BS thing to do because, and this is actually one of the biggest mistakes that I see companies, organizations do, which is, or it's a completely top-down and we have a managed by objective philosophy, or it's a completely bottom-up approach and this is a complete anarchy, right? So that doesn't work at all. So the way how it needs to be done it's middle way. So I truly believe we need to have a very strong vision to 3 to 5 years, what you want to do with the company. And that comes, of course, from C-suite, CEO, board of directors, whatever. So you define your vision, what you want to be in three to 5 years. You define what are the 5 pillars that you want to tackle the next year from company point of view. And you break these 1 year objectives or ideas or pillars into 3 months objectives. And what you do is you say, this is what we need to do. You guys now build your OKRs, explaining us how you will do it, right? And so this solves this kind of misunderstanding that some companies believe that it's completely bottom up and everyone is doing their own things. And that's completely wrong, because the vision is there, and the vision needs to come from executives. They are the ones being paid to define that vision, and they have the experience. Not saying that the people in the development side don't have contribution, of course, but the vision needs to come from top, and then it's cascaded to the bottom, and it's cascaded in a completely different way than MBO. It's cascaded in a way that we communicate what needs to be done, and they will communicate how they will do it. And it's a very small thing, but it's a very, very different thing.
I think that is just incredibly important advice, given that I've seen people do it both ways, and never, or very rarely, do they get to the point where they actually do that middle ground, which is right where it should be. And you're right, people end up either top-down MBO stuff or just complete anarchy. Go ahead.
That's very common. It's a very, very common. And
where did that misinterpretation come from? I mean, I've had pitched arguments with people that swear up and down they are, God's gift to OKRs, and it's like,
I think there are 2 streams of people causing these issues. And now I'll be a little bit mean, but your audience will forgive me. So I think a lot of the people that is implementing OKRs come from the Agile world. They are Agile coaches. And I was some years ago Agile coach, so I can bash a little bit about Agile coaches. So not all, of course, but a lot of them, they believe that the people should come up with their own ideas for everything, and the company should be self-empowered, and they should be a complete anarchy, right? So I think there's the bottom-up approach problem. A lot of Agile coaches starting to coach OKRs in organizations, and they don't understand that it cannot be a bottom-up approach or a complete bottom-up approach. And then there is another channel, another side of it, which is a lot of typical management consulting companies. I don't want to mention names, but we all know that they're very good in defining strategies and performance frameworks and so on, that for many years used MBOs, but because they never worked really in the organizations and they never did any practical work, and they don't understand the philosophy. And I had many consultants, those type of consultants, tell me, this is exactly MBO, but it's 3 months instead of 12 months. So that's the speech, right?
Ouch.
So I think the problem arises from these 2 different, complete opposite sides, let's say. And I think the difficult part is finding a consultant that is very good with C-suite, that can talk their languages, and at the same time is very good with the teams and can make this bridge and understand that actually the perfection is where you bring C-suite with the power of understanding what needs to be done from the development and the teams into the game, and create something where both contribute to the big picture together.
Mr. Gonçalves, if you woke up tomorrow morning, cup of coffee, cup of tea, whatever your caffeinated beverage of choice is, and a magic wand, and had 2 wishes affecting how people deal with OKRs, or at least how they define OKRs, what would those 2 wishes be and why?
So one that doesn't have anything to do with OKRs, but it has to do with human behavior, and I'm struggling a bit myself with that, is empathy. I think our organizations and our society currently is lacking a lot of empathy toward each other. And I truly believe that when we define OKRs, if we would understand a bit other people's problem, other people's objectives, other people's goals, we would be much more successful, and we would have much more success, a much bigger success rate than what we have today. And to be honest, you asked me for two, but I think this single one, it's hard enough, and it's ambitious enough. So I would stick with one. And I think this is what we are lacking in our society, in our companies, in our world, is a lot of empathy towards the next one. And this would solve so many problems.
And this is why I enjoy talking to you so many times across the podcast, because you see the right answers. Louis,
thank you.
It's been absolutely fantastic, Louis. The platform is, well, let's first start with how would people find out more about you, your organization, the things that you do?
LinkedIn is the best. So a lot of people is in TikTok, Instagram, etc. But I stick to LinkedIn because I think it's where my audience is. So LinkedIn is the best way. And Luis Gonçalves and the company is Evolution for All. So it will be very easy to search for me. If people want to know more about me, just connect there, and from there I can give any information. I can give information to my own podcast and my books and so on if people are interested. But LinkedIn is definitely the right channel to connect with me.
Absolutely, and we will have all that contact information in the show notes. As you know, at this point I open up the platform for you to promote anything that you would like. Obviously want to promote your podcast, but promote anything that you like.
No, I think the only thing it makes sense, well, there's a lot of things, but I want to stick with one, which is very aligned with what we did today, we talked today. I have a very small white paper guide for people that want to start with OKRs. So then I will give you the link, and we can put it on the show notes. But I think that's the easiest and very related to this episode. So if people want to start with OKRs, we have a white paper that they can download, and then as soon as they download, they started to get some emails to help them to implement OKRs in their own organizations. And I think that's the easiest one, and that will lead to our webinar about OKRs as well.
Super.
So, and people will think that I'm an OKR specialist. Actually, it's just one of the tools that we actually do, which is really a necessary tool for digital product development. But since we are aligned in this episode with OKRs, we stick to OKRs.
Understood. And we can come back to digital product at some other point in time. It's interesting. Arguably, one of the things that might be fun is for people to get a hold of the white paper, but also email the white paper to the head of their head of HR to sort of perhaps get them into the dialogue, or maybe convince them to sign up for and get the paper themselves. So again, Luis Gonçalves, this has been absolutely marvelous. Thank you for sharing your wonderful wisdom with the Software, Process, and Measurement Cast listeners.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here always with you. Thank you so much, and big hug to your audience as well.
In Reread Saturday News. This week, Chapter 7 of Coaching Agile Teams by Liz Atkins. While observing and facilitating might be the most prolific coach activities, at times teaching takes front and center. Teaching encompasses a wide range of behaviors, but the goal is always the same: to elevate the person or team you're teaching. Teachers are there to help people become better at something. Link in the show notes to this week's installment and all 7 previous installments of Coaching Agile Teams. Buy a copy, again, link in the show notes, and read along. A quick advertisement. Controlling work entry requires preparation and knowledge building to establish a path to control work entry. Magic words, magical thinking, not really the right way to handle that. Which is why Jeremy Willits and I have developed a work entry workshop. We recently delivered the workshop at the Path to Agility in Columbus to rave reviews. Interested? Email us at tcagley@tomcagley.com or willitsjm@gmail.com. We'd love to put on this program for your organization or for your next association meeting. The SPaMCAST will be on a 3-week hiatus. We'll be back with new programming on September 25th. In the interim, I asked the SPaMCAST columnists Jeremy, John, Susan, and Tony for a couple of their favorite columns they've delivered. For the next 3 weeks, we'll serve you the best of the best. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?